And this is really going to be a day-long, today, actually it's going to be a weekend-long celebration of Black feminism, performance, pedagogies, meaning how do we use performance in which to teach, inspire, and instigate change in our communities, and how Black women and Black queer and feminist women do that, and also creative practice. It's going to be a day-long celebration. And so as we get started, I just wanted to, just say good morning, and I'm glad that you were able to make it. If you haven't already, make sure you get a name tag, make sure you get a program for the weekend's events, and take a look and browse. So so we're just kind of gonna get started a little bit. So first, I want, my hope for having this gathering is that it's for it to be an opportunity for us to learn, grow, listen, and also create together. So today will be more about listening and also, interacting. But on Saturday, there are going to be 2 workshops with our guest scholars that will allow you to actually create and participate, and possibly even participate in the final performance of Black with the Area. Because we have, we'll get ahead and get started. So I want to say a few words about the Winton Chair Committee. This event is sponsored by Penny and David Winton. And the whole point of the Winton Chair in the liberal arts is to kind of encourage innovation, distinctive research in the liberal arts, with this, with the whole point being that this research should question established patterns of thought. What we're doing now is actually a cornerstone event, which is a 3 to 5 day intense visit from exceptionally innovative individuals, groups of scholars, and our artists who kind of create without regard to traditional conceptions of discipline or medium. In keeping with the mission of the Winton Chair, these visits aim to catalyze new intellectual relationships within and among the College of Liberal Arts, University, and also the larger communities. And Cornerstone visitors are encouraged to think outside of conventional forms of academic presentation and pedagogy. The labor for the Winton Chair is actually done by faculty members here at the University of Minnesota. And we actually do the hard, hands-on labor in order to make these types of gatherings possible. The tireless efforts of Sonali Pawa, Jen Marshall, Aaron Lorber, as well as the support of Diane Willow played a big role in allowing this gathering to unfold. So now I'm going to move on to kind of our visitors, and I'm going to start with a few words from Kitchen Table Press. And authors who publish with, Black feminist authors who publish with Kitchen Table Press. Because Audre Lorde said, "Your silence will not protect you." Because Barbara Smith said, "But some of us are brave." Because Toni Cade Bambara said, "The role of the revolutionary artist is to make revolution irresistible." And because Sylvia Wynter says, "Our poetics is our politics, is the way we make the world." And because love is the only thing to make, these women who we brought together fall in love with Black feminism every day. The Cornerstone featured guests, educators and activists, Alexis Pauline Gumbs. Could you raise your hand? Sydney Harriday. Andrew Jenkins, who you'll see later. Paige, who you'll see later.
Yeah.
Wait up, I'm missing somebody. We levitate. They breathe life into these words of Black feminist writers, authors, poets, every day and in the flesh. In an era when Black lives, especially Black women's lives and Black queer and trans lives, are threatened and under constant attack, the deep radicalism of their intellectual work is needed now as much as it has ever been in human history, but especially since that first crossing of the Atlantic Ocean in the Middle Passage. As you will see, these folks are artists, alchemists of revolution, The ingredients are fire, spirit, breath, movement, sound, word, and also organizing. Collectively, each tells stories that moves us beyond struggle and toward care, affection, recognition, respect, and trust, as well as open and honest communication. Their work moves within and between core themes including motherhood, Black girlhood, Black freedom struggle, and also spiritualized praxis. Our first guest scholar we have today is Alexis Pauline Gumbs. She is a Black feminist love evangelist based in North Carolina. Through a gorgeous array of scholarly work, poems, experimental fiction, and love letters, Dr. Gumbs spreads the message that Black feminism lives and that together we can create a world that we deserve. There's so much I can say about her, but one of the ways in which she really came onto my radar is through one of her educational projects called The Internal Summer of the Black Feminist Mind and the Summer of Our Lord writing workshop. Pauline's dissertation really did this really close and careful reading of Audre Lorde's poetry, and she revealed so much richness from her work, but she has not only published it, but she has also taught it in different ways and worked with it within and across different communities. For Dr. Gumbs, teaching is a spiritual practice and a sacred ritual. She creates spaces designed to get people present to their brilliance. Let me say that again. She designs spaces to get people present to their brilliance. For her, these are healing pedagogical contexts for participants to learn the very basic things that we need to know, that we are priceless, that we need each other, that we have all we need, and that is each other. Her newest book, Spill, Scenes of Black Fugitivity, which is a really creative, and I haven't read the manuscript, but I know her. It's a new look at the work of spillers, and it's made to be accessible and and useful in different types of communal contexts. This book will be released in October 2016 with Duke University Press. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs.
Y'all.
Good morning.
Folks, oh, you look so beautiful. You're awake. You got comfortable. Do you think we could sit in the first 2 rows?
Yeah.
I just want to be close to you. I'm not willing to lie about it anymore.
Let's see. Oh, wow. That makes me feel really powerful.
Would it be terrible for the video if we turn the lights down?
Oh, no.
For part of it? Yeah? That would be great.
Oh, they don't.
Does that work for you?
Let me find it. Perfect.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank y'all for being here. So I wanted to start with a meditation that I wrote, which for me is really what is at stake in this question of learning to breathe. So this is a poem called Chant, Breathe, also pronounced Can't Breathe. And it is dedicated to Eric Garner and also to Margaret Garner's daughter, who is the person who Toni Morrison's novel Love It is written in honor of. So if you can, I'm going to uncross my legs. I'm going to put both my feet on the ground, except for this thing I'm reading from. I'm going to remove the stuff from my lap. The computer was like, me too, I'm gonna remove the image from your life. So, by the way, this is a collage called After Brightest Star. And that's you. 1. Return to the place where you learned how to breathe, where night washed itself in your dreams. Return to the place where you learned breathing was bigger than you, or your fears of dogs, bats, and sea creatures, and would continue all night long without you trying to keep it going. Human freedom is like that, unstoppable as the ocean at night. Sometimes the crashing is just louder, like right now. 2. We are feeling it in our chests right now. The underwater knowing of upside down justice that has to right itself, that hasn't righted itself. The sinking feeling that the chokehold of the state is more persistent than the ocean. It is not. 3. If I could, I would bring all the people right next to the ocean to just sit and breathe with the ancestors. Just listen, knowing all this sand was bone and the stars are just us reflected across the black history of the universe. 4. I want every last breath to be a tide going out, so we can imagine some baby somewhere gasping into time with an unbroken custody of air. I don't want the choking struggle, the staccato of bullets shattering the song of what we know. But sometimes, even as the ocean slaps the sand, it sounds shocked to me. Shoreline shaping impact. This is happening again. 5. I imagine Eric Garner becoming the ocean, like Margaret Garner's baby, awakening stream, how all blood flows back to the salt in this water, how something unstoppable screams. We could just take a moment to listen to ourselves breathe. Notice if you stopped breathing at some point in the poem. Just allow yourself to breathe. And take gratitude that you have moved through everything that you have moved through before this moment. And here you are, breathing. And that you are not alone on the planet, that you are surrounded by other people breathing. And what a miracle it is. And how to not take it for granted. So, I'm going to shift the image. You can open your eyes if you want. I know it's a little bit dangerous to be like, it's first thing in the morning, close your eyes and I'm going to talk to you in a really soothing voice. Don't fall asleep, this is going to be really, really awesome. So this is Melvin Dixon, and he's here to remind us that when we breathe, we bring multitudes with us. We bring the ancestors who are no longer breathing, but who make it possible for us to breathe. And that includes the genetic ancestors who literally provided the materials for our lungs. And that includes the visionary ancestors who built the world we breathe in now, and who make it possible for us to imagine continued breath and evolving life. For example, Melvin Dixon, Black gay ancestor, scholar and writer who died of AIDS. And in his very last public speech before his body quit, he highlighted his breathing. How, as he watched his partner die and as his own body lost function after function, all he could do was focus on his breath. And he said to us, to those yet to come, in his final speech, titled after the gospel song, I'll Be Somewhere Listening for My Name, that we, those who would breathe with intention, were the heaven he could hope for. He said, "You, by the possibility of your good health and the broadness of your vision, are charged to remember us." So that's going to be our opening mantra. We're just going to repeat together. Breathe in, breathe out, remember us. And we're going to keep repeating it. And when you feel like, are we going to ever stop repeating it? We're going to still keep repeating it. And then at some point, we'll come to a close, all right? All right, and you can say it as loudly or as softly as you want, and you can have your eyes open or you can have your eyes closed. Breathe in, breathe out, remember us. 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 Breathe out, remember us. Breathe in, 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 breathe out. So I am breathing with and for my great-grandmother, Eugenia, who passed away during childbirth and is one of the major reasons I love to support people giving birth in remembering to breathe. And I'm also breathing with, not across the portal of life and death, but across the portal of space, my sister Ariana, who is getting ready to give birth this June, due date Juneteenth. And my mother and I are her doulas, so I'm breathing her into the space as well. And I would love it if you could turn to someone near you and share who, at least one of the people that you're breathing with today, who's not physically in this space with us. They may have transcended and become an ancestor. They may just be living their life somewhere outside of this room. But if you could say who you're dedicating your participation to today, when you remember how to breathe, who you breathe in honor of, that would be great. Go for it.
I was going to ask you. I can go first. I can go first. I can read it for me.
So the first set of it's nice.
My grandmother used to
So what she used were songs, right? So they would sing these songs, and these were the songs that, like, literally on June 2nd, in the middle of the night, when it was starting to rain, and people are like standing at the edge of the river, and they're supposed to get in this boat with this one general that Harriet Tubman would collaborate with, because he had rowed with John Brown, and she felt like he was a true comrade, not just a token ally or a flip-flopping politician like Abraham Lincoln, for example, who Harriet Tubman refused to meet with, even though he like really tried to get her to come meet with him in the White House, and even tried to get Sojourner Truth to get her to come. She refused to do that. She had very high standards for which white people she would collaborate with. And so this general that she collaborated with was like, had his Road with John Brown cred, and was the person that she collaborated with. And so they had to get the people to like get on this boat and cross the Combahee River in the rain, in the middle of the night. She describes it like people like just came, like they came like with pots of rice on their head and with like holding pigs. They were like, we're taking this with us, like, you know, like holding the kids. Like it was really, talk about do-it-yourself reparations. They were like, this is legit, very dangerous, in the middle of the night, in the rain, and succeed, which is what happened. And so it was after that moment that the first colored regiment arrives in that area. Some historians tell it backwards. So it was that victory that actually allowed that to happen, and there was this big celebration in a local church, and it was the first place where Harriet Tubman gave a public speech, and it was covered in the newspaper, and it was the first of her freedom actions that she was able to publicly take credit for under her own name. Yeah, my people are free. My people are free. So I think about what it means to trust our dreams. I think about what it means to speak affirmation in the present tense. And I think about what it means to believe in the freedom of our people with the kind of energy that allows us to design our actions according to that belief, even if that belief is not being reflected anywhere else. My people are free, which is a big thing to say, and a very different thing to say than my people are worth $20. And that's all I'll say about that for right now. So this Combahee Uprising was a major inspiration for an amazing organization of Black, lesbian, socialist feminists called the Combahee River Collective. Woo! Folks love and appreciate the Combahee River Collective in here. Yes, yes. And when they were deciding what they wanted to name their group, it was like this time where like stuff was being named after Sojourner Truth, but you know, they were thinking about what are we going to honor an ancestor with the name of our collective, and what they decided was they actually wanted to honor a collective uprising with their name. They actually wanted to invoke the energy of those hundreds of people seeking freedom, and definitely inspired by Harriet Tubman's role in that. But I think that's also something we can learn from, something that's instructive, to say that we're invoking, yes, we honor the great individual ancestors who we love and appreciate, but also we want to bring the energy. Our breathing can bring the energy of those people who took that breath and moved across that river, right? Like we can do that in the way that we relate to each other. And it was necessary. So this is a collage I made called Cross My Heart, based on one of the pamphlets that the Combahee River Collective created in 1979 in response to ultimately 12 Black women being murdered in their city in a period of 3 months. And at this point it was, you can see how it was like, okay, it was 6, it was 7, it was 8, right? So this is the depth of how this increasing death. And so the Combahee River Collective used strategies of coalition to respond to this. They really were drawing visibility to the fact that there was no response that they felt was acceptable, that the response of the state was that it didn't matter because these were Black women. The response of the Black nationalist community in Boston was that women should stay home in their place, neither of which were acceptable or affirming, based on the politics of the Combahee River Collective and their love for Black women. So they decided to start doing self-defense trainings. They decided to use the visibility of this in collaboration with poets like Audre Lorde and like Ntozake Shange to raise awareness about the pervasive violence against Black women in our communities. And they also really transformed the infrastructure around institutionalized, community-based responses to gendered violence. And so this is the time at which the first spaces where women who are experiencing violence can go to as they escape situations of violence start to be opened in this community. And so they were part of a coalition called CRISIS, which is an acronym that means infrastructure for supporting people who are going through violence, but I don't remember the actual things for each letter of the word crisis. And this was really huge. And the way that they did this work was based on a declaration that they made in their Combahee River Collective statement 2 years earlier in 1977. My favorite part of that statement, I don't know if that's true because I have different parts of it like painted all over my walls, but the part that I think has the most to teach me in this moment is Black women are inherently valuable, in alignment with that belief, even when it's not reflected in the state, in the actions of the community, in the space that we as a community maybe even are in our own healing. And the first time that I repeated that sentence with a group of people was with 21 Black feminists gathered on the shores of the Combahee River. Black women are inherently valuable. And we worked through what rang true, where it rang true in our bodies, where it rang false in our bodies, who we would love to say that to, who we were afraid to say that to, who believes it in our lives, when we believe it. What are the spaces when we can say it and believe it? What are the spaces when we say it and we are angered by the fact that not everyone believes that that's true, right? So, another instance of Black feminist breathing. You might have an experience that could allow you to relate to what it feels like to be trying to speak out against the murders of sisters in your community and then to have to stop because it's even worse. It's even worse than what you thought. It's even worse than what you were holding before. You might have an experience in the contemporary moment that allows you to relate to that and what it takes to keep breathing. So what the Combahee River Collective did was certainly they cited themselves in their own powerful statement. Black women are inherently valuable, but they also used and repeated Ntozake Shange's poem With No Immediate Cause, which is an incredible poem that if you haven't read it recently, I definitely encourage you to read. They used the technology of collective performance, speaking of whatever the words are after learning to breathe for our thing about creative praxis and performative pedagogies. They used performative pedagogies and creative praxis and collaborated with Audre Lorde to create Need, a chorale for Black women's voices, which was a way of articulating and connecting what was happening to Boston to violence against Black women that was happening in other cities around the country, and as a ritual under chest-constricting circumstances. We love you, Combahee River Collective. Yeah. We're so grateful for you. I have the chance to see recordings of her speaking. She is this type of genius who is relating on all the levels that exist at the same damn time, which is beautiful and graceful and sometimes difficult to be present to all at the same time. She is really talking about how what's happening on the level of the cells in my body, and what's happening on the scale of my entire body, and what's happening on the scale of my spirit and the spirits in this room, and what's happening on the scale of my community, and what's happening on the scale of the planet and the environmental systems, and what's happening on the scale of the cosmos and the entire universe is the same thing at the same time. Which, if you read The Salt Eaters, you can see her saying, this is what it is. This is what it is on the level of Velma Henry's body. This is what it is on the level of her arts community. This is what it is on the level of what's happening to the land around them. This is what it is on the level of the wind currents. It's just really deep, right? And Toni Cade in 1988 went to a Black writers retreat, Black women writers retreat, organized by Essence Magazine in Nassau, Bahamas. And they're also planets, and they're ringing with the sound of the universe and make daily decisions based on that kind of connected reality. So profound. It's like, well, then what should I do? Right? Like, what do I do? And so, there's so many amazing things that Toni Cade Gumbs has said, like sister is a verb, for example, which I think is a beautiful thing to say and live based on, especially since I'm breathing here with my sister. And she also said, she was asked if she thought that fiction was the best way to achieve revolution. And her response was, the most effective way to do it is to do it. Can we repeat that together? The most effective way to do it is to do it. Can we repeat it 4 more times? The most effective way to do it is to do it. The most effective way to do it is to do it. The most effective way to do it is to do it. The most effective way to do it is to do it. Because sometimes I have these moments, I don't know if y'all ever feel like this, where I'm like, okay, what do I do? What do I not do? Here I am, this individual body interconnected with all the other bodies on the planet, interconnected with every other planet, interconnected with the entire universe, and I'm like waking up in the morning deciding what to do and not do, and like how to be accountable to all of that. And sometimes it's overwhelming, and sometimes I get breathless in the face of that. And then what starts me breathing again is the most effective way to do it is to do it. The way that Toni Cade Gumbs believed in herself, believed in her sisters, like that we could have Star Maps, Proceedings of Congress, poem stories, we could have like the book of everything, and to believe that in such an expansive way, and to believe in the people that she encountered, such that she has a friend who said it got to be annoying to this particular friend, because like whatever somebody was doing, it was like, oh my goodness, you're knitting this. You know what we could do? We could like knit a scarf around this entire building and show how at the level of this chakra, this could be, you know, like it's just so much belief that what you're doing is interconnected and has so many possibilities. And like, she has a friend, I mean, maybe this is a friend of me, I don't know. She had a person who was like, really Toni, everybody, like every little thing that everybody is doing? Yes, every little thing that everybody is doing, right? That is what she believed, and that is what she worked based upon. And so then it allows me to believe, okay, I'm doing what I can do. I'm being who I'm being. I'm interconnected with all of you. We're interconnected with everything. So yeah, it is a big deal. It is a huge possibility for me to just do what I'm doing in this moment. Yeah, thank you, Toni Cade. Thank you again and again and again and again. Toni Cade Gumbs, she's the person who, when I don't have my self-care right, like comes to me in dreams. Like I start getting like, Salt Eater starts falling off the shelf, and like people start calling me like, I had a dream, we were all on a bus, and it was like the Sisters of the 7 a.m. And I'm like, oh my goodness. That's the type of thing that happens. Toni Cade Gumbs has been vigilant in reminding me to take a breath and to be present and what the consequences of not giving myself space to do that are, similar to what you were saying of like what's at stake when I don't notice whether I'm breathing or take the space to breathe. So I just want to thank Tony K. Bombara for disrupting my life many times when I was not breathing. This is Essex Hemphill. Anybody in here already love Brother Essex Hemphill? Yes. Fierce prophet of rage, clarity, and truth. Oh my goodness. So, there's so many things to say about Essex Hemphill. So, Essex Hemphill was the type of person who was put in the position that we were introduced by Melvin Dixon to understand how breathing could work across generations and how a creative process could be held across generations. And one of the major ways he was called to do that was through continuing and honoring the legacy of the life of Joseph Beam, who was a collaborator, loved one of his, who had the vision and created the first anthology of Black gay men's writing called In the Life, and had this piece in there called Brother to Brother that actually drew its entire first paragraph from a piece by Audre Lorde called Eye to Eye, Black Women, Hatred, and Anger. And Joseph Beam, I just want you to know something. Joseph Beam, well, let me say, thanks to Essex Hemphill, who worked with Joseph Beam's parents to collect and archive his papers, which are at the Schomburg Center for Research on Black History in Harlem, and which are part of the Black Gay and Lesbian Archive. Because Essex Hemphill was accountable to do that and to make sure that those letters were preserved, I was able to find out that Joseph Beam had this great correspondence with Audre Lorde and with Barbara Smith, where he talked about just how inspired he was by their work, and also the work of Cherie Moraga, and also the work of Tony K. Bombara. And he had this vision to create this anthology of Black gay men's writing that was very much inspired by the work that Kitchen Table had done, and Homegirls, which was like his Bible. And it was just a love fest. Like, it was a love fest, and it was a really useful love fest. It was like, what do we do? How did you do this? Like, how did you get, because I'm trying to get the brothers to write stuff, and then people are afraid of the consequences, and like, you know, or like, how did you do it, and how can we do this? And really honoring the precedent that Black feminists had set for the work that he envisioned himself into, which I want to note that as a huge deal. And so the letters would go back and forth, and like when In the Life came out, Audre Lorde took it with her to Grenada, one of her first trips back to Grenada, and just wrote this letter to Joseph Beam that was like, I cannot tell you. She says, I cannot tell you, or maybe someday I can, how much it means for my son to live in a world where this book exists. You imagine getting a letter like that from Audre Lorde? Honey, so, and then the next thing she says is, when you see Essex, tell him that I love him too. You know, I love that brother, right? So these letters are like, you know, I'm having my don't cry over the priceless archival materials moment that I have over and over again. Like, please don't get snot and mucus on the sacred record of our ancestors. So, but just to say, like, how palpable the love is, and how it has not expired, and how Essex Hemphill wanted us to know, wanted us to be able to know, and to reach back and touch that. And so did the archival work to make that possible. And then also did the work of creating Brother to Brother, the anthology that Joseph Beam envisioned and didn't live to enact. And I think about that level of accountability, especially for somebody like, you know, Essex Hemphill, just like fine, no movement to respond to AIDS, but also the level of humility to say, like, she told this story about Langston Hughes and how she had grown up, she'd been part of the Harlem Poets Guild, she had been somewhat mentored by Langston Hughes. She never knew she never knew anything about what we would now call Langston Hughes' queerness at all until after he had passed away. And she thought back to, you know, not shade against him, but she thought back to like how it would have been different for her that she considered she was like the only person in that space operating. And it was a very alienating and isolated experience for her to be like, I'm in this straight black space, but I'm here, you know, in service of my poetry, right? And she thought about the other spaces that she'd been in, and she had always felt like she's the only this, she's the only that, and that also was a major part of her work, you know, to bring that into space, but that it weighed on her so much. And so she made a decision, and she was like, listen, all the parts of myself that I can offer, people are gonna know, because I don't know who in the space needs that part of who I am, but I don't want them to have to survive without it. And I just thought that was, I mean, I see it for what it is, an act of love to us, right? Like that's the type of thing that you say for the people who are coming after you, that you, by whoever you are doing what you can to make space for them to be who they are. Whatever parts of me are useful to you, I want you to know that they're here. I want to offer them in the way that I can. And the other thing that Audre would say a lot was, I am who I am, doing what I came to do. Can we repeat that? I am who I am, doing what I came to do. And I'll just prescribe it, you know, for those moments where people are asking you to justify you as you walk in your purpose and live your purpose and disrupt boundaries. Or when you're in a space, even a space like this, or any other room in a university or anywhere else, where you feel like you have to prove that you're doing something worthwhile with your life, and like you have some kind of visionary project that should be cool enough for somebody else to think is cool. Just I am who I am, doing what I came to do. So why don't we practice by saying it 6 times? I am who I am, doing what I came to do. I am who I am, doing what I came to do. I am who I am, doing what I came to do. I am who I am, doing what I came to do. I am who I am, doing what I came to do. I am who I am, doing what I came to do. Yes, you are. Yes. Yes. Oh, thank you, Audrey. Thank you. Message received. And this is June Jordan. This is the first collage that I made of this series. And it's called Wholehearted. And I mean, it's my own collage, but yeah, I love it. Like, it keeps me accountable though, because I love this particular image of June Jordan, and like, you know, wherever I am in my space at home, she can see me, I can see her, you know, like, she'd be looking at me like, be who you are. So I appreciate the side eye, the loving side eye that June Jordan is serving in this particular picture. And June Jordan, there's so many stories about June Jordan, but one story is that she was an author of children's literature. And her first book, Who Look at Me, was interestingly a project that had been designed as a commentary and a sharing about art that depicted Black people and art by Black people, that Langston Hughes was supposed to write a poem to go with, but then that never happened, and then June Jordan ended up being the person to do this task, which is, I don't know, you would find that intimidating, but I would find that intimidating. And she took it on in such an incredible way as an opportunity to really engage the way that Black people are seen and the way that Black people see themselves. And she dedicated the book to her son. And she does this work in this book that really respects the intelligence of the children who would read it. You know, like it's not she had strongly believed that children's literature was neither simple nor an excuse for condescension, nor an excuse to not tell the truth. And so she has this incredible representation of what it is to be Black in diaspora in this book. She says, "New energies of darkness, we disturbed a continent like seeds." Now, what description of diaspora and Middle Passage have you heard? Like that, to me, like I'm like, that is it. That is it. But I say that a lot when I'm encountering with what June Jordan has said. But just the energy of that image to say, this is who we are. This is what it means for us to be here, and to use that as a place to say, and so who looks at me? How do they look at me? What does it mean to be seen, hyper visible, and also unseen on this land? And goes through an entire history of art with a completely radicalized framework for thinking about it. And so this is in the mid-1970s that this book comes out, and she's like talking at different libraries in her archival papers, the bulk of which are at the Schlesinger Archive of Women's History at Harvard. You can see the letters from this period of time, and like nobody knows who June Jordan is. She mostly is still receiving letters in her married name that she didn't continue to use after that, Meyer, but people are like Jane Meyer, like, you know, it's kind of like this thing where it's interesting to come into the archive to somebody who's like this, right? Like this is how I see June Jordan, but bigger. And like to look at that period of their life where nobody knew who they were, even the people literally writing them letters, inviting them to come speak, didn't know like what their name was, which is deep. And she spoke on a panel at the 1974 Howard Black Writers Conference, where it was her, Lucille Clifton was on the panel too, I'm forgetting who the third person was on the panel. And she gave this speech towards a survival literature for African children, African with a K, as a Pan-Africanist statement that just like is a treatise on what is the narrative that is destroying the world, like the narrative of greed and scarcity and environmental degradation and criminalizing the most oppressed people for their own oppression. Like she just runs it down, and she's like, this is what our children's literature has to respond to. Like this is what our kids are being taught just by living in this society. So as the people who are creating the children's literature, we have to tell them a story where one, these characters are named for what they are. It's not that there's not enough food, it's that greed exists and it's being hoarded. Like this is something that children do know because they're impacted by it, and so we can't be afraid to talk about it. But also we specifically should use children's literature as a space where children get to imagine what are creative solutions to those problems, where they get to see people collaborating to do things in a different way, and where they get to imagine that the world can be drastically different from what it is. And throughout her career, this was one of the things that June Jordan is not as well known for, but she was a warrior in terms of the discourse of children's literature, and she wrote many reviews for the New York Times Review of Books in their children's literature section, and she slayed so many books. Like it was like, oh my goodness, you know, like just what that might have felt like for these other authors of children's literature. But she was like, this underestimates the brilliance of our children, this underestimates it. My son read this and he felt like, you know, like she just like really used that space as a place to say, no, what we have to say intergenerationally is the most important stuff we can say, and we must bring our deepest bravery and our boldest creativity to that task every single time, and she didn't let anybody off the hook for it. There also was, at that time, kind of like a realist movement in children's literature, where it was like we should be training children to be realistic, which is like, it's very interesting that there would be a movement in children's literature to train children to be realistic in the 1970s and 80s, right? Like after a very visionary moment it's like, why don't we train these children to be realistic and like not to expect life to be good? You know, like all of these things. And June Jordan was not, first of all, it's so absurd. The biological to the interpersonal, like she's talking about flowers growing out of the ground and the bees, like love is what fuels all of that. And I just think it's the most perfect name for love and definition of love. And and the essay is available in print in this book, Revolutionary Mothering. I'm really happy about that because it was never published in any of her collections of essays, and I want you to memorize it and teach it to everyone you know and give it to everybody who you care about, and especially the people who haven't figured out how to care about you properly, and remind people that love is life force, because I think that it's the truth. I was like, this could be the entire source of a religion, like love is life force. So before I like float into the air, just based on how empowered and loved I feel by that and by these ancestors, I want to say that just like our breathing brings through multitude, just like our breathing is the way that we access the life force that we need to exist, my hope is that these pieces of wisdom, the other pieces of wisdom that you know and have and hold from the people who've inspired you, can be a resource in those moments when you want your breathing to be shaped by what is affirming, what is true, what is possible, even in the face of violence. And I'll say that I know that what is repeated often, and what is sometimes even the rhythm of my heartbeat and the rhythm of my running, circulating brain, are messages that are actually not worthy of my existence and are not worthy of the multitudes that breathe through me. And so Black feminist breathing, for me, is my way of learning to breathe in a way that honors what this life is about, like what I can do with this life, and all of those who I'm challenged to honor. It's a retraining. It's a reoffering. And so that in those moments when I'm still, what's there is, I love myself enough to be who I am, right? What's there is, I am who I am, doing what I came to do. And my assignment for you is to keep collecting those forms for your own breathing. They could be things, I did a whole project of things like things that my grandmother said, things that my aunties said, right? Things that they said that I can use as a meditation and as a reprogramming for my breathing. They're all around us, right? Repetitive things, actually, that people say, or things that people say once that could be repeated to our benefit. And my wish for you, my dream for you, is that all of those words, all of those acts of love that have been offered by our ancestors and communities can sustain you, can course through you, can offer you the freedom that you need and that we are.